Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, today we're talking about the divide between classic or TBC classic esports and retail esports, specifically in WoW. So, a couple of things I've noted recently is the amount of attention that the Asmongold tournament had. In the last sort of 2 weeks, a lot of people talking about it, a lot of people interested in it, a lot more than the AWC that was out 2 weeks ago. So it kind of draws to mind a question, which is, well, where is the direction of WoW esports generally going to go? Will it kind of go back into TBC with these tournaments, with these ability to have teams, to have rivalries, even at lower levels, which I think is really interesting? Or is TBC essentially just a fad that everyone is going to get sick of and be back to retail by 9.1, maybe 9.15? I think the allure of TBC will still be there for quite a while. I definitely don't think it's a passing sort of interest, especially for a lot of players that really enjoy it. I think, it has something really unique and charismatic about the relatively basic sort of UI. The pace of the game is a bit easier to understand, and it's a bit slower. And, we have some clips today that we're going to go over that kind of look at that as well. The other thing is obviously whatever's the most dominant esport is just usually going to be whatever game is most popular, or I guess format that is most popular. So what I mean by that is if TBC is super successful and we see this consolidation of players from retail moving into TBC because they're sick of retail, uh, classic players who have always been into PvP, but they're classic players. They don't play retail at all. So, maybe 40% of those guys ranking and doing PvP are going to do arenas just as seriously, or maybe 100% of them, right? Which is huge boost to the number of players. And then a lot of private server guys from TBC and Wrath, who really enjoy the arena aspect of WoW, but haven't been able to find an opportunity to jump into arenas that they enjoy because Classic had no arenas and retail arenas might not interest them. So I think in terms of player base, the arena player base in TBC might be a lot larger, and we're going to talk about that in a video later, where we kind of go over all the reasons for that and sort of where that might lie. But what I wanted to talk about today was just, I guess, the reason why I think TBC Arena might just become at least equally a dominant esport compared to retail. The first thing is something that I can show you in the game. Everything in TBC, or most things in TBC, are really easy to see and understand. So if you've watched the game a little bit, you know that this mage hitting something with a frost nova on it is going to do more damage than normal, right? That's something really easy to comprehend. There's not even buffs on him. It's just everyone knows that, This warrior hitting something is warrior rep paladin is hitting something. This guy has wind fury on him. Everything's really obvious, and like when I go on my warrior, um, it's very clear what's happening throughout all these sections of the game. I'm just clicking at the moment because my hands are very cold. So yeah, I think there's something really simple about TBC and Classic as a whole. It's sort of easy to understand what is going on in the same way that a lot of the times on retail, I feel like uh, things that look like they should do a lot of damage don't do a lot of damage. And then things that look like they shouldn't do that much damage in terms of a visual effect, right? Because we're talking about the spectator aspect of esports as well, don't really feel aligned with, what they're doing. So, for instance, when I guess without the legendary, Blade Storm by a warrior looks like it should be the absolute strongest spell that a warrior has. And in Wrath, that was true. Even in Kata, to an extent, that was true. But on retail, it's just condemn. Like this button that seems almost more like a charge. It doesn't seem like it should do damage in the first place. These types of things, which are small, but actually make a considerable difference because if you're watching the game, you want to see something interesting. You want people to be able to pick it up even without understanding really the base mechanics or the tooltips of the game. While the commentators might be able to like kind of explain things to people, it's really really hard to convince people what's going on if there's so much complexity and that there's this dissonance between what's happening visually and then what's happening in terms of the outcome of the game. So when something goes really big like an infernal, um, you should be able to tell that something bad's going to happen, and a lot of the times with WoW I feel like that's not necessarily 100% conveyed. I'm going to look at two clips right now to kind of show you the differences between, I guess, the TBC esports and then the retail esports, and then kind of discuss which one I think is probably going to do better. Okay, guys, so to give you a bit of an example of what I was talking about, we're going to look at sort of these two clips here, which I've got up. One is obviously the TBC finals that was on today, and then another one's from the AWC. So as you can see, really easy to see what's going on. You know, the kicks, everything's moving pretty considerably slower. You can see the spells being cast, you know, in a much more considered, I guess, um, it's just easier to see what's going on, to be honest. There's stuff like this rogue going into stealth. It's very clear. You know, sort of what's happening here, where different people on the team are. And to be honest, you just see this guy dying. Like, honestly, you see his healer getting feared far away, and this guy just dies. And you can kind of see that in a really straightforward manner. He gets this stealth. His healer is literally super far away right now. Might be going for a drink or something. Easy to commentate that, easy to understand why this rogue is in trouble. He's only got blind left and shadow step. He gets frozen here, and then these ice lances just chunk him down. There's really not much he can do. Easy, understandable way you can see why this team won compared to the other team. Straightforward as hell, right? So let's go to the next clip. We're going to look at an AWC game. So the AWC game, I feel like also the panning in AWC games, like it's feels so big. It's really really hard to track what's going on. But if you can kind of see what's happening here, there's some stuff that's obvious, but like he uses the hunt. There's just stuff happening all the time. Um, it's way more intense, like which is good to play. I prefer playing this playstyle than the TBC playstyle. But in terms of an esport experience, like understanding sort of what's going on, why things are important. You know, for instance, like here, if I was a new player and I looked at this and I see this fear and the fact that Sam I am trinkets like a 1 second stun to kick the fear, pretty big deal. But you don't necessarily think about that when you're just watching the game. Like it's almost like too intense with the micro there. And even here, you see this polymorph. It is understandable like what's happening at every point in the game, but it's still like really hard to process and track all this stuff that's going on. So overall, when we look at these two games, like I understand maybe the example I picked actually wasn't the best, and we didn't cut it off properly, which is my bad. But I think you can kind of see what I mean by the difference in kind of understanding what's happening during a game and then why things are a big deal. I do think retail looks way cooler. Like there's more stuff happening, but tracking all this stuff, and maybe it's an issue with how games are being captured or recorded on the AWC. Uh, it's really hard to put that in front of someone and tell them what's going on who isn't intimately familiar with Arena and why it's important. Whereas I do think in TBC, it's a lot easier to understand. This guy is frozen. You threw ice lances at him, and the guy who heals him is not near him, you know? So, very, very straightforward concepts to pick up. Um, that's sort of why my hypothesis is that TBC might become the more popular uh, viewing experience at least for the next 6 to 12 months, until AWC becomes more interesting. Because to be honest, I can't remember an AWC apart from the game where I forgot who it was now. I think it was team MC'd and got the bop and all this kind of stuff on Drainer. That was like the last time I was really excited about watching the AWC. More recently, I feel like the format's a bit awkward. Um, like you have a lot of games, but they're not necessarily super interesting. I think there could probably be some work on creating a bit of a backstory and rivalries and all this kind of stuff, because that makes it exciting. But as a whole, maybe that's easier to do with TBC, and we're going to kind of talk about this in other videos as well. But broadly, just this simplicity of the game, the lack of like the amount of classes, like there's way less classes, so it's kind of easy to understand. Okay, here are these ones. I know what these ones do. And alongside that, you have, this consolidation I was talking about where people are kind of coming back in together to all play TBC. So a lot of interesting things to think about here. Would love to get your thoughts on this and, whether you're more excited to watch a TBC tournament or a AWC tournament or whether you really don't care either way. All right, peace boys. Take it easy.